Are we good to go?
Hope so, yeah.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our regulatory panel. Today we have amazing guests. We have Radim Kozub, a fellow colleague, attorney at law from Czech Republic, specialized for blockchain law. We have Ondřej Kovařík, member of the European Parliament, and his focus is on capital markets in the EU, among other things. And we have Joachim Schwerin, principal economist in the European Commission, who was deeply involved into legislative process of enacting MiCA, and now he is on events like this, giving his perspective on where do we head with MiCA further. So welcome again, and let's kick off with general question about MiCA. So this piece of regulation is well underway and effective. Many companies filed for different licenses, and what's your feeling? Does MiCA brings what was promised to bring, more clarity, more compliance, legal certainty, or it's still early to see its effects? Ondřej, let's start maybe with you.
Should I start first? Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the invitation. I think, yeah, that's a very good question. I think at this point it would be quite courageous to speak about, MiCA bringing stability, because many companies, the businesses are actually struggling to put together a full compliance regime with it, and I think it's completely natural. MiCA is a new piece of legislation regulating activities that have not been regulated before in many areas, and I think it is fair also to say that it's not only businesses that needs to go through this first experience of MiCA compliance, but it is also the public administration side. So the supervisors, the supervisory authorities, they are building their expertise, they're building their teams, and I think it's honest to say that it is actually different from country to country. Different member states are approaching this in a different manner. So you can have companies with a very good experience, I would say customer experience, having very communicative and approachable supervisory authorities, and on the other hand, some of them that are very conservative, that are not very open to communication, and where things are taking very, very long. So I think this is something, in my view, which is natural. Comes with the implementation of new piece of legislation, but I think what we should do also in terms of our work as European and then member states institutions is just to make sure that first that we look at the good practices or the best practices of those that are actually already present in the market, and trying to make others aware that these things can be happening smoothly, and also if there are some frictions, mainly in the harmonization, in the regulatory practice, to make an effort to harmonize them. So let people talk and share, the good experience and practice, because the sooner we get into, let's say, regular regime of MiCA implementation, the better for also seeing the positive impact on the grounds.
Joachim, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting always to see what people actually from perhaps outside Brussels understand or think when they hear MiCA. Because what most people do not see is the process that is behind actually having a regulation out. And that's completely different from other parts of the world. I mean, I hear very often that they compare MiCA with what they do in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Singapore or wherever on the world, and then why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? Now, what a regulation in the European Union is basically a sort of very ingenious piece of harmonization that basically approaches sort of global harmonization. I mean, we have 27 member states plus 3 associated countries, so 30 countries that have to agree on a text, and that means governance that have all different colors. That means the European Parliament, that means national parliaments, And then when you have done that on the basis of a technical proposal, you get all the European and national regulators in with the level 2 standards, where, in my opinion, then the mess really starts. So we have a 7-year process to get MiCA because we are always asked to put things in writing. And you guys, you know that, I mean, that's already from school and then higher education or whatever you did for your job. When you start writing down stuff, it's not that easy because as Goethe said, I'm from Germany, so I couldn't find the time today to write you I couldn't write time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long letter indeed, because a short letter requires thinking about each and every work, and that's what you have in a regulation. And so you have a technical proposal, then you have the trialogue discussions, and then you have the level 2 standards. And yesterday alone, the Frankfurt University, we spent a whole day only discussing technical tools to measure the energy consumption, the power supply when you create tokens. That's one tiny part of the level 2 standards, which is huge. So by definition, Ondřej, I don't know if you can agree to that, but by definition, you cannot have a perfect regulation or a good regulation. What you have is a best effort that honestly puts on paper of what your knowledge is, knowing perfectly well that at the moment that it stands there, it's already in part obsolete, it has been overtaken by certain results, it is not exactly what you wanted, but that's the nature of regulation, and the alternative is, I would say, chaos, which I love very much for DAOs and DeFi and stuff like that, but of course to have established financial players that want to make a business model and lead legal certainty, they prefer bad rules compared to no rules at all, and that's the reality.
And Radim, what's your opinion about effects so far from practical perspective as you are in day-to-day contact with clients, different projects?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for this question, because what I can say or speak of is the experience in the field of the practical life with MiCA today. And it's something between sad and, well, very bad, maybe terrible. Because, well, what is the point, what is the problem? I think it's that European institutions, maybe also many of regulators, fail to provide like sufficient information, preparation, and some kind of training, because what actually happened is that you have completely unregulated sector industry, which many times came from the, let's say, very roots, very like startup style environment. And suddenly, you tell them, all right, guys, you have 2 years to become compliant with more or less like light banking regulation in terms of difficulty. So I think in such a case, you should definitely put a lot of effort into some education, into preparation, and that didn't happen almost. Or maybe some of the regulators were a bit of ahead, but I don't think this is what we should get. So by the end of the day, there is like smaller part, I would say, who is really trying to get ready. Some of them already applied. And there is much bigger part of the clients who are now trying to find out what's going on, and they're already asking, okay, shall I apply for MiCA or not? But it's pretty tough to tell them, well, you have like, in Czech Republic, you have 2 more months before you should apply, but just to prepare the application for you, that, well, 2 months is not doable right now for us. So I think they are now learning that they are like in 2 months, they'll be in a situation that they haven't applied yet. They have the operations, business operations going on. And if they continue without the application, or let's say like out of the rules, that means that you can lose the trust of the regulator, which is one of the criterions, one of the principal parts of what you should get or you should have for the application. So that's how it is.
In tech language or product designer language, user experience could have been better?
It's rather about the kind of infrastructure for education of everyone, regulators, industry players, like really. And this was not even incentivized somehow towards the private sector. Yeah, it was like, okay, some of them, someone started somewhere, but that's not. I think that's not how it should work. Yeah, like if you're talking about the European regulation, actually. Yeah.
But maybe with every new piece of legislation, it takes time for things to settle in and for everyone in the system get accustomed to.
Well, yeah, that's pretty natural, but what I'm talking about is that if you want to move from zero regulation, basically, to tough regulation, demanding regulation, and like you are actually, because it's not like that you're moving in the sector that is already regulated. No, it's not regulated, so that they don't even know what the regulation is. That's how it works for many like business entities. So you just have to put a lot of effort into the education of what the legislation is. Yeah, it's not just so this is the difference between the, let's say, regular situation. Okay, there's something new here, so we just need to get accustomed to it, and this type of change. Yeah.
Ondřej, since MiCA regulates partly, maybe, it tackles at least capital markets, we still have a lot of other directives and regulations that cover capital markets, like MiFID II. Can you comment on how MiFID, for example, affects capital markets and Web3 crypto industry, actually?
Well, I think at the beginning when the MiCA was proposed, as Joachim mentioned, I think now it's already 5 years ago, the very idea was to limit the scope of MiCA regulation to those provisions of financial services that are not regulated somewhere else. Just to make sure that there is no overlapping between the existing legislation, as you mentioned, for instance, the MiFID, so the Market and Financial Instruments Directive and regulation, and then the newly coming MiCA. Obviously, I mean, it's very well said in theory. In practice, it's always very hard because not only, well, there were changes in terms of how the MiCA was negotiated, but also MiFID is transposed in 27 different member states in 27 different ways. But I think I would rather look at it from the other way around. For me, MiCA, and we can spend hours discussing whether it's perfect or not. I mean, MiCA is a reality mainly for crypto business and for issuance of digital assets in Europe. And at the same time, I think, to be honest, it's one of the most advanced pieces of legislation in terms of addressing these new technologies, digital assets. We haven't had anything like that before on the European level. There were national legislations, right? I mean, those who are active in other countries, in France, in Germany, there were local provisions on digital assets, virtual assets, whatever we call it, in different countries. So I think one of the additions is that MiCA is harmonizing in on a single market level, so on 27 EU member states, and it's actually setting a new bar, new benchmark. And I think what would be very useful, it would be actually, and that's also what I'm all the time suggesting to my colleagues in European Commission, to look at the existing financial legislation, for instance, like MiFID, but it can be all others. Now we have the payment services package opened, electronic money, the directive that is being included into it. So there's a number of pieces of legislation, the market abuse regulation, etc., that are already existing, but have been adopted in previous periods when the digital assets sector was not that heavy as it is right now. And I think my ideal vision of it would be, let's keep the MiCA standard as a standard setter, and let's align everything else together to it. There's nothing much in MiFID that actually provides some opening for the digital assets issuance in terms of securities, etc. We will have now a very, either it has been already published or it will be published, the new proposal on securitization in general in Europe. again, I think if we can actually bring it on the same level with digital assets legislation, it would be only good, because we can then talk about issuance of securities in using the DLT technology, for instance, which in the country where we're currently sitting is impossible by the law. So I think these are things that we should focus on more. Look into implementation of MiCA and how we can actually enhance it by aligning the existing legislation to the same level. And on top of it, we also have one thing that I believe is a good blueprint for the next way of legislating, and that's the DLT pilot project. So an experimental legislative environment which invites the businesses, but also the supervisors and regulators to come together and propose new business models, new initiatives, mainly in the area of securitization and issuing securities on blockchain. And I think this is also one of the areas where the business can look into and say, okay, this can be ways how the regulatory framework can help the innovation grow without creating too many obstacles in terms of compliance, but rather opening new path for future projects. And I think, yeah, this in my view would be the best tasking for the remaining of the decade in terms of regulatory activities, rather than coming back and, let's say, revising MiCA, etc. I think we have much more that we can do in order to make these regulatory framework even more functionable than it is today.
Thank you. And Joachim, given that you were involved in drafting MiCA, and you are familiar with the goals that European Commission wanted to achieve with this regulation, can you give us maybe some insights how that process looked like, and maybe does MiCA strikes the right balance between investor protection and crypto innovation in Europe?
Ilya, that's a very interesting question, because really when we started drafting MiCA internally, and you're absolutely right, the formal procedure is 5 years, but actually we started the first draft after the ICO hype in 2017. Because that's when people realized for the first time there's something out there, and the Commission wanted to support it. Which is why the first focus was only what I would call utility tokens, which is now Section 2. We don't call them utility tokens anymore, but it's basically the non-hardcore financial stuff in a way, where there were a couple of pretty liberal ideas that are still in there. For example, white paper instead of a prospectus. Actually, I'm working a lot on DAOs now, and I think we don't need to regulate DAOs, but I'm considering myself at the moment whether it would not be advisable for a DAO to have the governance token similar to a white paper under MiCA, basically explaining who issues a token, how many, what technology, etc. There's a little bit of core information that people should know. Then the reversal of the proof, so you send the white paper to the national regulator. You don't wait for approval, but basically you have the passport for 30 countries. I think that's pretty revolutionary. Now, and Ondřej is much better a politician than I will ever be. We all know that when you want to achieve a compromise, you have to be hardcore at the beginning. So basically we brought a pretty radical view forward that at the beginning was interesting to no one. And then, of course, Libra came and the stable coins, and suddenly the whole political area was interested in that. And then it became difficult because, honestly, MiCA is a hybrid of three things. MiCA is the liberal part on the utility tokens. Then it's the big part on the stable coins, where the governments told us very clearly prohibit all of that. It's bad. It's not prohibited, but we have rules. And the third thing is simply the stuff that is not in. We cannot forget that. In a regulation, it's always also very important what is not regulated, and that's really a lot of stuff. Does that at the end of the day strike the right balance? I think that completely depends on what your business model is. I know a lot of businesses that are very happy, but others, for example, asset reference tokens, or what I would consider normal stable coins, for example, on gold, on commodities, real world assets, etc., it's a disaster in terms of license applications. So that is because of strict rules that have nothing to do with MiCA, because that's Basel standards and other things as well, which are very difficult. And there I need to completely align with Ondřej, because there's a lot of stuff that we now have in MiCA through the discussion, and especially also the approach that existing regulators outside Brussels have taken, that are stricter on crypto than on other stuff. And I briefly mentioned the environmental standards. We don't have that for MiFID products, or reverse solicitation, or many other things that I could mention, holding thresholds, unhosted wallets, stuff like that, where basically there is an attitude from some parts of the system that want to regulate everything in crypto and more strictly than is out there. And this we cannot afford. I think we started really MiCA as the liberal part, not next to MiFID, but underneath MiFID, so between TradFi and DeFi, as a MiCA part that is in between. And in that sense, for many business models, it has not achieved the objective. So that is work in progress, fully along the line that Ondřej says. This being said, if you do manage to get a license under MiCA, it is a massive selling point for your business. And it's not only a massive selling point for your business within the European Union, but I very often hear, as I mentioned briefly before, these talks about these big players in Asia, for example, companies go there, look at our markets and platforms and what we all have there. I can tell you in private, when you talk to the Asian regulators and there comes a new company that wants to do business in Asia, the first thing they ask is, do you have a license in Europe? Because if you have a license in Europe, it means that we can already cut short a lot on the bullshit that otherwise we would hear, because then you're a serious player. When you don't manage to get a license in Europe, we need to thoroughly look at actually what your business model is. And this is a patchwork. The reality is a patchwork. Take Bitpanda as one of the leading European platforms. They might have 7 or 8 licenses on different services in 7 or 8 different European countries. That's the reality. So that's also where, of course, here now in the Czech Republic, I was in France, and the Netherlands last week, completely different mindsets of the regulators. You have countries where the regulator simply says, we don't talk to you. You have others where basically they said, don't send us the junior people, we only want to talk to the boss. But it also comes from the other side that sometimes you have companies that go to the regulator and don't know what they talk about. And they are not prepared. And I think this needs to grow together from two sides. So it's a massive learning experience. We need to foster that. We have a actually massively successful sandbox at the European level, where we're now starting the 3rd cohort with 20 new use cases, where we bring actually 50 regulators, not individual regulators, but regulatory bodies in Europe, together with the innovators to really discuss that. And I can tell you, you can ask the most simple and foolish question in this sandbox without anyone noticing, because that's actually where a lot of people stand. And this is the kind of dialogue we need to see. But you will never have a homogeneous, perfect market or product in 27 plus 3 countries. That's not the reality, but that is not anywhere else on this planet either. So let's not criticize more than we deserve. We deserve probably a lot of criticism, but things in Europe are, I would say, on average better than they are outside of Europe.
And Radim, from your practical experience, where do you see MiCA creating the most friction in day-to-day business? Is it maybe for startups who, by definition, don't have money either for their product marketing, let alone compliance, or it's maybe for other product companies that offer VASP services or maybe stable coins, similar?
Well, that'll be a different question for like what is the friction right now and what is going to be once the market will be, let's say, operated based on real like MiCA application, and there will be more or less only the MiCA regulated companies. But right now, during the process, yeah, I think it's the positions you need to appoint people to, hiring new people, and let's say this like this type of compliance approach or thinking of how your company should operate from now on. Yeah, this is the toughest part for them, because this is something like if your business is growing, if your company is growing, well, that's quite natural change, yeah, because sometimes it's quick, obviously, so you need to adapt quickly, but more or less you have some time and let's say also you're somehow ready to adapt to the grow, to changes that it brings. But as I said, yeah, like well, that is actually something what would be great if we had it here, if we could use these 2 years for this adaptation. So, for example, I remember that like in October, September 2022, we actually set up the project called Crypto Regulation CZ, yeah, and we wanted to already help the clients to start preparations for all the requirements that MiCA set out, but it took us like a year and a half, a year and a half until we could really see that the clients are somehow like interested, and we really like worked hard. Yeah, to like, okay, you should start now, not like next year or like 2 months before the end of the transitional period. So, I mean, yeah, this change of the actually the company itself, what it brings inside. This is the tough part, yeah, because it needs you to really rethink a lot of things, or like change your approach, yeah, even in like the day-to-day life of your company. That's what I can see. But in practice, like after a year or two, we will see what will be the friction that it brings once operated based on MiCA.
And from my perspective as a non-EU lawyer, I'm from Serbia, and comments from different projects and colleagues around Europe, I see that startups struggle the most because MiCA sets high standards, which means compliance costs, which down the line means that it will be more expensive to comply. So do you think that this might drive those projects out of EU and push them to jurisdiction shopping?
I don't think so. This is going to be the reason for driving out the companies or like making them to find another jurisdiction. This is actually rather the reason for decrease of like smaller providers, because if you are small and you don't have the ambition to grow as much as needed for attracting some investor that could help you even with this cost you need to suddenly spend on something new, well, in such a case you will probably like end up closing your company or trying to sell it to someone. Yeah. So this is the consequence of the cause. However, there are definitely the reasons for jurisdiction shopping. So far, from my experience, it depends. For example, with the token issuance. Yeah. What we are trying to explain to the clients is, look, okay, if you want to focus on the market, if you want to actively offer something offer the token on the European market, then MiCA makes sense also in terms of some marketing aspect, yeah, because we can say, okay, I'm fully compliant with the new law here. There is not so many token projects approved, yeah, or white papers approved yet, so you could be one of the first. And well, this could be part of your branding, yeah, for this project. But if your idea is, well, okay, maybe I'll have some European customers, but I will rather focus on the more worldwide community, then it can be a big limitation for you, yeah, because then you're already using another, even the marketing strategy you're going to use will be different. Yeah? So this is, for example, the example of it, but that's for the token issuance. Yeah? For providers, I don't know yet. I don't know yet because it's much harder to decide, I'm not going to focus on the European market here anymore. I'm going to focus somewhere else, because if you have the clients here, yeah, you just don't easily find the clients in like 1 month somewhere else to extend what you have right now. Yeah? So I think we will see this, the reality, in practice, this change in 2 years, maybe. In 2 years, the same place, I think I'll tell you a lot more.
We can discuss it again. Just for the audience who doesn't know, jurisdiction shopping is basically you sitting down and looking which jurisdiction offers the best terms, either for tokens, taxes, incorporation, so on and so forth. So just looking around what's the best option for you. And maybe on the policy level, expanding on what Radim explained, what do you think, are there jurisdictions like United Arab Emirates, Singapore, or Switzerland who might exploit this, not to say burden, but high standards and compliance costs that MiCA sets in order to attract European startups?
Yeah, I think we'll see this in practice. But maybe, Ilya, if I can just come back what has been said before I completely forgot it. There is exactly one thing in MiCA in terms of not being able by legal regimes to distinguish between significant CASPs and, let's say, regular CASPs. We are not making any difference. So startup or a very small company, a very limited provider of services, or global company entering European market coming from US or China or Asia, they all have the same amount of rules to comply with, which is obviously not fair. And myself, I was fighting for that. I have to admit, I lost that battle politically because obviously, even from the regulatory point of view in member states, the regulators prefer to regulate and supervise lower amount of bigger entities than, but this should not be a reason. But I mean, we have in MiCA differentiation, different regimes for different size of tokens. You can issue tokens which will be completely without MiCA compliance rules if it doesn't reach necessity in terms of thresholds, amounts, etc. But we don't do this distinction for CASPs, and I think it's a mistake because we should have had these, let's say, light MiCA regime for startups and small companies with low significant potential impact on financial and monetary stability on business markets, etc. And then full regime for global or those companies that they are operating in global markets. We don't have that, and possibly I hope that we can remedy that at some point. I think it would help a lot to solve this solution because what we created right now with MiCA, it's actually a condition to enter the market. What I believe we should have done is make MiCA one of the stage of growing your business. Mm-hmm. You see, so start your business, and then if you believe that it makes sense for you to grow with full MiCA rules compliance, then do it. And then you can market it very well, and then you can grow the company better. You can even access finance better, etc. So I think this is the distinction that we didn't understand properly, or the majority of my colleagues in the parliament. And I hope that we can do something about it. And in terms of jurisdictions, I mean, if you have a startup, even if you have startup in crypto, and you mentioned it yourself, the MiCA compliant rules will be one of the parameters that you will look at. You can have very friendly MiCA regulators in Europe. You can opt and establish your company in there, and then you realize that it's very hard in terms of tax rules, it's very hard in terms of AML rules, it's very hard in terms of job restrictions, for instance, and then you realize that, I mean, you maybe saved some money and effort on MiCA, but you're struggling on something else. So to be honest, I think it's a mix. For this decision making for companies to start their business in a different market, in my view, it will be a mix of these considerations. MiCA will be definitely part of it, specifically for crypto-oriented markets and companies, sure. But I think we should, if we want to make sure that the startups are not leaving Europe in general, we should not only look into implementation of MiCA, but we should look at the more general business environment in Europe. And to be honest, if you look at, for instance, in UAE, they offer many more advantages that just, less strict crypto assets regime that the company would go for. So I think it's a much more complex question in this regard. And in my view, it would be hard to assess only on the basis of how the MiCA is implemented. But nevertheless, we should focus on the fact how we can make sure that the startups grow and stay and scale up in Europe before going elsewhere. And even if they are started in UAE or Singapore or somewhere, what can we do to bring them here in the next stage of their life?
Joachim, your take?
Actually, this last remark, Ondřej, is very timely, as you know, because we adopted today the startup and scale-up communication, which is on these things. But I think there are indeed a couple of things coming together. I mean, in my opinion, we should distinguish between what is MiCA or crypto-specific and what is not. So startups in Europe have a number of problems, not the lack of innovation, but the scaling up, the financing of the last rounds, a number of regulatory issues. These are general conditions. It doesn't make the situation better, but it is first of all a thing that is outside MiCA and crypto. Then we have the skills part, we have the mindset, we have a lot of other things. So if you then boil it down to what is actually crypto regulation, in my opinion, you observe that you could, while you can take these examples like Vara now in Dubai or whatever happens in other places of the world, that this is a sort of game in sequences. So we bring out MiCA, others learn, they do something, they make mistakes, we learn again, and that's how the game basically goes. So it's not a static optimum, but it is a thing where ideally people globally learn from the mistakes that others are doing. And sometimes they change very quickly, also in the UK. I mean, they had quite a big ambition of being innovative, I would guess. And what I see the last 6 months is basically all of that crumbling pretty much down. One interesting fact that you see in the US, in my opinion, and let's not talk about the US, is that when you look what the Trump administration has done in terms of regulation and improvement of rules, it's basically zero. What they have done is they helped certain people change the mindset. And that's an interesting point, because I think we talk too much, although it is merited, about details in written regulation, and we don't talk enough about general mindset that people have. And there I see two issues. The one issue is if I was a company and I would be in a position to talk to my regulator, I would massively focus on the human factor. Because that's the one thing that I have learned in my professional life. You need to get the right people in the room and ask the right questions and do the right stuff. And I know a lot of regulators that don't have much experience with the crypto stuff, but the moment that you engage with them openly and you appear trustworthy, that you get a much better deal than when you don't do that, and I've seen it too many times before. The second point is, indeed, there is one aspect which is specific to crypto, and that is a matter of concern. And I think you said it perfectly. There is a tendency in the legacy system to prefer to continue what they've always done in the past with their slow regulation for banking and capital markets, that they have a few number of players that they know well, and they take ages to adopt the rules and improve them a little bit. And that you don't have in crypto. So certain parts of crypto are being dried out by, I would say, an obsolete mentality that you have in a lot of regulatory systems at national level. And that is not so much from a systemic perspective important for the crypto market itself that is in MiCA, but that is very important for the innovation that we get, for example, in distributed systems, whether we look at DeFi, whether we look at the whole DAO space, etc., privacy coins, all of that is what's going on, which I'm immensely enthusiastic about personally, because the moment that you actually don't talk about crypto because it's crypto, but you talk about crypto because you see it as a danger, because actually there are privacy enhancing technologies, but you would like to have everything under your control. Or whether you see everything from an AML perspective, whereas AML is just a small part in the whole thing, and shouldn't always take the priority above all things, then you are really causing a problem. And this is the fundamental problem that I actually see in Europe. It's not that we have indeed certain things in MiCA that can be done better, but that we have still too many people out there that don't feel the heat, they don't feel the pressure from others outside the system because they think they can go on endlessly like they've always done before, and that's the wrong attitude. So that's a mindset problem, which will be solved by nature, it will be solved by demographics, because all these old people at a certain moment will be dead. And that is what we see throughout human history. I've done a lot of research of that in my past as a scientist, basically also for other things. You do not change systems by convincing people. You change systems by having these old fall in their coffin and the young generation takes over. And that is what we see in crypto, but it takes a couple of years more.
And since we are almost done with our panel, can you just sum up and end on a positive note, if possible, objective note maybe? Do you think that Europe will be able to catch up and stay on top of this tech race in the future, in coming future? Ondřej, you can start and...
Well, I hope so. No, I think the key would be actually, in my view, I think Joachim put it right in terms of the change of mindset. We see more and more, and I think it is also, let's say, sector specific, but in my view, it's more innovation specific. We should slightly change the way we do regulation in Europe. Maybe it's not slight change, maybe it's a fundamental, but we should stop see it the old-fashioned way, so that we have on one side the public side, that is, the paternalistic, and on the other side the business that is seen by the public side as by definition an actor that is trying to bypass the rules. And I think the future of this is in a very close cooperation, specifically on innovation and on areas such as digital assets, where the business trends and innovation happen so fast that the public side is actually not able to react properly. It's about creating these experimental environments, such as the pilot regimes and sandboxes, etc., to put together and communicate and talk. And I think, by the way, also in what I understood what's happening in the US right now, there's much more emphasis put into the better communication between the regulatory and supervisory authorities and the business itself, to find, how we can strike the right balance. Because, just maybe to sum it up, you asked about, did we strike the right balance with MiCA? I hope so, but again, the MiCA was mainly created by the legislators around the table, with just consultation of the industry. I really hope that in next stages we would be able to already design and draft and adopt the legislation together with the industry that will, in the end will be compliant, because only this way we can guarantee that the regulation will be sort of open to potential future innovation. And I see already signs of it already happening right now. I think this should be more our new practice, and if we are able to understand that and do it, then I think Europe can actually still have a lot of potential to build on it. Obviously, not everything is perfect, but at the same time, I think the conditions are quite well established in Europe. I think we should build on it, but we should not overthink stuff. We should actually make it simple and try to use what is happening also around us. To take the best out of it and make sure that the things that we believe are important together, what we expect to be important in future, that are merged together. And in this regard, I think many young people also believe this should be the way forward, and I hope they would have a say in what we do in next decades to come.
Anything else to add?
Extremely briefly, looking at the time, I mean, just one thing to add. I think it's important to have the reality check, and you mentioned that rightly. I mean, what we're now getting in the next wave of innovation is that every child can talk to a sort of system where behind that is an AI that writes a smart contract on what has just been discussed while the conversation is going on. So if you see, we are talking now blockchain and crypto and stuff, but if you see the recombination of technology, then actually the numbers and the basics matter. And the basics there are, we have 450 million people in Europe that are on average meaningfully educated, that take an interest in this stuff. This is a massive asset to look into the future. And this is where the pressure and the innovation will come from. So that is something that in a way is a natural wave that makes me very positive. But it's still a difficult life if you know that the future will be bright, but you have to get there. So we still have to get there.
Radim, will we make it?
Let's hope and pray that the future is bright. And if we think of regulation in general as something that could rather incentivize the quality of the environment and let's say some business field, some industry in general, I think we will, by the end of the day, see like if we were successful or not, because we were what we've seen in Europe so far, in European countries, the level of development and state of the industry so far. So we should see another progress in the future. If we see that more and more businesses are moving from here, or actually the new trends are happening somewhere else, then we are not successful. Yeah. So definitely there will be metric finally that it will say if it helped the industry or not.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your insights and predictions. Thank you for attending this panel, and see you tomorrow.